Welcome back to Weems Motor Co. It's time to get that engine ready to go back in the frame. Stick around. Alright guys, so since the last episode when we were putting that front end on the 1950 Triumph, we have been busy cleaning parts, getting things ready for reassembly on that engine. Now that's the plan today. The goal is to get the bottom end of the engine all assembled. That's the crankshaft, the rods, the cams, the two engine halves, all that put together so that we can get it into the frame and continue this process, hopefully getting this bike running and riding for the Georgia Grundle Run. Now, as of today, we have 22 days left before the Georgia Grundle Run, and we're gonna have to take all of those 22 days and work really hard to get this bike ready to go for that amazing ride. Now, like we said, today we are going to be assembling this engine, which means we have to start from the heart, which is the crankshaft. Now, this is not a how-to video. I've told you guys that many times. I don't do how-to videos. I say, hey, watch how I do it. Now, there are some great resources on YouTube if you are looking to rebuild your Triumph engine. First one I'll tell you to check out is definitely Lowbrow Customs. They have a great build series where they actually tear down a unit construction engine and rebuild it all up. So make sure you check out Lowbrow. While you're there, make sure you go over to their website, buy some cool stuff from them because they're great friends. But today, like I said, we are going to be starting with the crankshaft, and not a how-to, but I wanted to show you guys something cool because a lot of people ask and say, you know, I've heard it said that, you know, you need to clean your sludge trap. What exactly is a sludge trap? Let me show you guys. Alright, so on your crankshaft, the center of your motor where the rods ride and the pistons are at the top of that, you actually have a hole right through the center of that allows the oil to flow in and feed the oil out to the connecting rods. Well, inside that hole is a tube, just like this. This is what we call a sludge trap. Now, what does a sludge trap do? Essentially, it is Triumph's version of an oil filtration system. So as your oil breaks down and gets carbon and things inside of it, it'll actually get trapped between the circumference of that hole and the outside diameter and the inside diameter of this tube, trapping that sludge before it gets out to the connecting rod bearings, which is a very soft aluminum surface. So you want to trap all of those impurities, and if you're rebuilding your bike, it is good to go all the way down and clean that sludge trap up. I've seen these things packed solid where you couldn't even tell there was a tube in there. I've seen them halfway filled, and I've seen some of them in pretty decent shape. That all goes to say how well the person is maintaining their bike, how long it's been sitting, what kind of oils they are using. So we're gonna get the sludge trap that's all cleaned out, ready to go in this. We're gonna go ahead and put new shell bearings on the connecting rods, get those mounted up, get the heart of the 1950 Triumph ready to go into the two engine halves. So, time to work. Let's do it. So pretty simple process. You might be asking yourself, well, why did you put that air hose on the end of that? Well, that is where the oil goes into the crankshaft and feeds across to those rods, and I wanted to make sure that we still have a good oil flow through there. So we blew the air to make sure that oil was coming out of the journals and we're gonna have good flow. All right, next part is getting these connecting rods assembled with the new shell bearings. Shell bearing, it's a piece of aluminum. It's actually white metal, very thin, but very crucial because this is the bearing surface as the rods go around the crank. I always make sure that I spray everything down with brake clean, get everything nice and clean, because This part of the process, we do not want any contaminants in it. So when we get those rods on there, they should flow nice and smooth. So everything's cleaned up, ready to assemble, ready to get torqued down, and get this crankshaft ready to go into some engine cases. Let's put it together. Not bad, pretty easy process getting these rods all connected up. For the sake of time, I cut out some of the editing on that. What I do is I go through a sequence where I step up by every 5 pounds of torque on each one of the nuts until I get to 28 foot-pounds, and then I check to make sure that it's got a good fluid movement to it. And then I go ahead and remove the nuts back off, clean them off with some brake clean, and I use some Loctite on those. Even though those are locking nuts, I still want to make sure nothing comes loose in the bottom of these engines. So a little extra never hurt anybody. You might also be asking your question, like, what Weems? What's the little oil can? What you got in there? Are you using assembly lube? No, I don't use assembly lube on these old engines. I use the oil that is going to be inside of the engine, and that, my friends, is 20W50 oil. Why run so thick? Well, it's kind of hot here in Florida, and you know, oil breaks down viscosity with temperature, so I figure, you know, run the best oil I can in these old Triumphs to make sure that they're good to go. But our rods are all connected to our crankshaft, our sludge trap is in, and we have the sludge trap plug all set, ready to go to get into these engine cases. Now, let's get these engine cases prepped. Alright, so the first thing to do when we're getting ready to prep these cases is make sure that we have all the hardware, all the bolts, cams, all of that stuff that goes into the bottom end, that you have it all cleaned and prepped and ready to go, because nothing's worse than stopping in the middle of building your bottom end to go clean a part. So, make sure you get all those done. We also have to heat up the cases. I've got the bearings over in the freezer getting nice and cold so we can drive those into the case halves, and then we can slide that crankshaft on home where it will be for hopefully the rest of my life. So, but we're ready to do that. Let's heat up these cases, get the bearings in, and then we can start assembling the heart of this 1950 Triumph. Let's get it done. Pretty easy job there. Now, the next thing to do is to load the cams. Well, before you do that, there's a little breather that goes behind the intake cam. Gotta put that little breather in there, lube up these bushings, lube up the cams, drop those cams in, and then slide that crankshaft right down inside there. Pretty easy. Let's knock it out. Alright, so rocking and rolling, got the crank, the cams, all that stuff together. Now comes the tricky part. This one is, it's not that it's a hard thing, it's just you got to get it done rather quickly, because what we're going to do is actually put gasket compound around where these two faces join, so we can prevent leaks from the bottom end. And so once we get that contact cement on there, we only have just a short amount of time to get everything torqued. So that's why it's really important to have all your hardware laid out, everything prepped right there in place, so when you start this process, you can get it done quickly as possible. So we're gonna put the gasket compound on there, put the other case half over the top, making sure that we do lube those cam bushings, And then we're going to take our hardware and begin to torque in a cross pattern until we get those two case halves torqued down together. Let's knock it out. And just like that, we have one bottom end buttoned up. You might have noticed in that video that I kind of like had to flip it around and work out some issues. Well, that spring and that breather on the back side of the intake cam was not filling right, so I wanted to pull it apart just to check and make sure, and we got it straightened out. So cam's moving nice and smooth, and obviously crankshaft beautiful. So we're going to let this sit for about an hour, let that gasket compound cure up really good, because we're going to have to pull a few of those bolts back apart to mount the motor mounts so that we can get this thing slapped in to the 1950 Triumph that we call the Judge. So right now, while we can take a little break, why don't you guys jump down in the comments and let me know what you're thinking about this project so far. It's been a really fun time showing you guys from start to finish how this thing goes. And you know, sometimes you run into some tough stuff, so maybe if you want to tell me about what the craziest part that you've seen on this build so far is, and maybe some goals to have other than making it to the Georgia Grundleroy. So with that, stick around. Alright, now that the engine has set for a little while and all the gasket compound sealer is good and set, it is time to throw the bottom end into the frame and get this bike going. Alright, this is a great time to see the heart going back into the frame. Let's knock it out. Well, folks, that's gonna wrap up the video today. Got the bottom end into the 1950 Triumph, the Judge. Super stoked about it. The next video that we're gonna be doing is going to be the primary, so make sure that you tune in next week to watch that video. But with that, we're gonna wrap her up today. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you are new around here, jump down and hit that subscribe button. If you really like the video, hit that thumbs up, turn those notifications on, and let everyone know what's going on right here at Weems Motor Co. Peace.